My wife and I have written 2 books on conflict resolution in marriage, and I've written 9 murder mysteries. It's a little bit awkward to be writing books on both marriage and murder. Makes it look like I can't make up my mind, and it actually makes my wife nervous sometimes. She actually said to me once, "Hey, if anything ever happens to me, everyone will know." And I said, "Honey, if anything ever happens to you, no one will know." Which is a good principle of marriage, by the way. Always keep them on their toes. You might want to write that down. Whenever I've done something wrong and I feel the need to do penance, I go online and read reader reviews of my novels. In fact, I brought one along to show you. This is one of my favorites. Take a look at this one. This one comes from Norma in Amarillo. I haven't had a chance to read the book, but I'm looking forward to it. Heard it was great. 3 stars. 3 stars. I wanted to write back to Norma and say, "Hey, you're killing my average here. If you're not going to read the book, give me 27 stars. But Norma is a hard woman to please. The comments on my novels that I find on Amazon kind of fall into 3 categories. The first one is actually a criticism disguised as a praise. The comments that say, "I love your books because there's no profanity or graphic sex." In other words, I'm a good writer because of what I don't write. So my next book contains nothing but blank pages, and I'm hoping to win a Pulitzer. Second category of comments from my Christian readers is, "There were no conversions in your story. Your main character is a jerk. I kept waiting for him to become a Christian. I can only hope that since you're writing a series, that will eventually happen." Third category of comments is, "Your book is not Christian or not Christian enough." In fact, one reader wrote to me and said, "What I want from a Christian book is at least one character clearly identified as a Christian who disapproves of inappropriate lifestyles." And I wanted to write back and say, "Did you ever meet a woman named Norma?" You know, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, about the power of story. Christians today, we like to say that we believe in the power of story. I'm not so sure. Now, Jesus, there was a guy that believed in the power of story. You know, Jesus' earthly career only lasted 3 years. Wouldn't you think that he would have always been in a constant state of panic? I mean, running here and there to make sure he did everything that needed to be done and that he said everything that needed to be said. And surely he would have been a writer, don't you think? With the critical, earth-shaking, cosmically important things he had to say, surely you would not entrust those things to oral history. Surely you'd write them down, and surely his style of writing would have been like a lawyer, don't you think? "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Refer to subsection Q for exceptions to this policy." Not only did he not write as a lawyer, he didn't write at all. He entrusted these incredible truths, these incredible things that we need to know, to story. Did you know that 1/3 of Jesus' entire teaching is left to us in the form of parable? Story, fiction. Why would he entrust so much to that form of communication? Because there are problems with stories, aren't there? You know, I was not raised Christian. My father was an atheist. When I left home at the age of 18, I had never set foot inside a church. That's the way my father wanted it. So I can still remember reading the stories of Jesus for the very first time, and I was stunned. Not only because of what he said, but because of the way that he chose to say it. I felt like that temple guard that was sent to arrest Jesus, and they came back without him. And when the Pharisees and chief priests demanded to know why, they said, "No one ever spoke the way this man spoke." Do you ever feel that way? Is that the way you feel when you read his stories? In fact, let's do a little survey here. If I asked you to give me one word that for you characterizes the stories of Jesus, what word would you say? Jesus' stories were, fill in the blank, call out some words. Open-ended. Perplexing. Convicting. Radical. You know, there's a word missing here. Have you noticed? conspicuous by its absence, a word I've never had anybody say. The word is clear. Nobody ever accused Jesus of being clear. Why would he entrust so much to story when stories can be ambiguous? Why would he entrust so much to a form of communication that isn't always clear? Has anybody ever asked you, if these things are so important to God, why doesn't he just write it across the sky so everyone will know? The answer to the question is, he would, if it would do any good. See, the assumption that underlies that question is that human beings are basically people of goodwill, people who love God. We just lack information. What God needs to do is inform the uninformed. The interesting thing as you browse through the Bible is you don't find human beings described that way. What is the description of the nature of human beings in the Bible? I think Jesus was the most generous. He basically said we're like whining children. No matter what God does, we're never satisfied. James said we're more like polluted springs or wells. One minute you're getting fresh water and the next minute foul. You never know what you're going to get next from a human being. Jeremiah said we're more like stubborn mules that plant ourselves in the middle of a road, and unless God slaps on a bridle and bit and drags us toward him, we would never draw near. Hosea said we're more like cheating spouses. Ezekiel, a little more blunt, said, no, we're just whores. We're spiritual sluts. Ouch. The interesting thing is, if you think people are basically beings of goodwill, warm-hearted toward God, who just need to be informed, they just lack information, then when you tell them a story, your highest value in storytelling will be clarity. Make it clear. Put the cookies on the bottom shelf. Don't bury the lead. No child left behind. Interestingly enough, Jesus didn't make his stories always clear. And if you think they are, I have some scholars I'd like to introduce you to, because they would love to get some clarification from you. Why would he use that form of communication? Well, maybe it's because God knows the problem with human beings is a little more complicated than information. A fallen human being, well, human beings need more than just to be informed. What God is trying to do isn't simply inform the uninformed. What he has to do is to woo back wayward lovers. And stories are very good for doing that. Let me teach you how to ruin a joke. A priest walks into the temple to pray, drops down to his knees, looks into the sky and begins to pray, oh God, I am nothing. I am nothing. And while he's praying, a Pharisee walks into the temple. He kneels down beside the priest. He begins to pray, oh God, I am nothing. I am nothing. While the two men are praying, a poor man walks into the temple, lies down prostrate on the floor, and he begins to pray, oh God, I am nothing. I'm nothing. Priest nudges the Pharisee and says, look who thinks he's nothing. Did you get it? Did you get it? See, the priest and the Pharisee think they're nothing, but they really think they're something. They're acting like they're humble, but they're really proud. They're proud even of their humility. Did you get that? Let me do it again. A priest walks in, yeah. You have any friends that tell jokes like that? Can't bear the idea that somebody might not get it, so they insist on explaining the punchline, and it's insulting, isn't it? How to ruin a joke. Now, that is a fairly subtle joke, and if you got that joke when I told it, did you feel that little sense of delight? In fact, it's more than that. It's a feeling of arrogance, really. It's a sense of superiority. In fact, it was hard to resist the temptation to not kind of look down your row, make eye contact with somebody else. Did you want to do that? Give them that little look that kind of went, did you get that? I don't know about the rest of these morons, but you and me, I got that. There's a sense of delight because a good joke is a puzzle. It's a challenge. I'm handing you the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle one at a time. You have to assemble them. And if you can meet the challenge, understand the joke, there is a sense of delight, isn't there? I can't tell you how many emails I've received from readers that said, I read your last book. I figured out the ending 3 chapters before the end. And I've always wanted to write back and say, 3 chapters. Most readers do it in 5. You must be slow. Now, you'd think I might be offended by an email like that. Oh, no, that's the kind of reader I'm looking for. Because you know what he's actually saying to me? What he's saying is, you faced me with a challenge, I accepted. I read carefully. I paid attention to all your clues, and I put them together, and I figured out the ending in advance. That's the kind of a reader, a writer is looking for. A guy told me the other day, I've been reading one of your books for a year. Thanks a lot. That's almost as bad as the guy that tells me, I love all your books, I check them all out from the library. If the guy took a year to read my last book, boy, it's a book he just can't put down, right? But when the guy tells me I figured it out 3 chapters in advance, what he is saying is, I met the challenge, I engaged you. And that's what Jesus was constantly doing. He wasn't informing the uninformed, he was wooing back the wayward lover. And that's why he would tell a sometimes ambiguous story and then say, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. That's a strange little statement, isn't it? You know what he's actually saying? He's saying, if you have no willingness to engage me, information will not help you. So I give you a challenge, the challenge of a puzzle, of an ambiguous story. Now, if you have the willingness to engage, that tells me something about your heart. And if you are willing to do the hard work, if you'll meet my challenge, you can figure out what my story means. Are you going to engage me or aren't you? He who has ears to hear, let him hear. I'm out of here. And that's how Jesus told stories. I can't tell you how many times an editor has said to me, I love your manuscript. Do you think that we could strengthen the Christian elements? And I always say, you mean, could I make it more obvious? See, the assumption is if I would make it more clear, if I would put a speech in one of my characters' mouths, what's called special pleading, to make sure everybody gets the joke, I don't improve the story, I ruin the story. Because I take the challenge away. I'm doing the mental work for the reader, and he is bored and he is insulted. We say today, as Christians, that we believe in the power of story. I don't think we do. I don't think we trust the power of story, not the way Jesus did. I think we believe in the power of sermon, because sermons have touched us and sermons have changed our lives. And we've told ourselves that if we can repackage our sermons in the form of story, they'll have more power. But they don't, because the rules of preaching and the rules of storytelling are very different rules. We've made the mistake today of thinking that if we make our stories more obvious, they'll be better. But when we make our stories more obvious, they actually become less powerful. By making our stories more Christian, we actually make them less Christian. At least, that's what Jesus seemed to think. Thanks.